So now we are recording, as far as I can tell. Yes, recording on this computer. Okay, so my name's Erica. This is Gutsick Gibbon. That's the YouTube channel that you're on right now. And this is Nerds Busting Genesis Apologetics. So today we're going to be looking at Noah's Flood on North America. And I have some other nerds with me here who are going to introduce themselves now. Whoever wants to go ahead and go.
Well, since everyone else is being quiet, I'll introduce myself. I'm the Dapper Dinosaur. I'm the fetching Ceratosaurus massicornis that you see in that wonderful room with a fish tank and a Star Trek replicator and a Godzilla picture. I have a channel. It's Dapper Dino. It's not the one that does coding tutorials, so if you try to search for me and you find yourself looking at coding tutorials, you're in the wrong place.
Look for the theropod with the hat. Then you're in the right place.
Well, that would describe both of us, but he's green.
Really?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I did not know this channel existed until after I made mine, and then I found out there was some other guy with a cartoon T-Rex with a top hat.
Tell me he doesn't also have the tie.
I think he has a bow tie.
Okay, well, there we go. That's a distinguishing element. Okay, right. Next, introduce yourself.
I'm Colton. I am a geology student in Florida, and I'm a former Young Earth Creationist turned theistic evolutionist. And I mean, I was in the previous video, but if you want to learn more about me, you can just go check that and give it some more traffic.
That's true. You may remember some previous faces, maybe, if you watch that 2.5 hour video.
But yeah, I'm here to get very steamed at how these people are abusing geology and the wonders of Earth history to interpret the Bible in a very specific and very factually incorrect way.
We have been picking on you, Colton, where there's been a lot of geology material that we've been going over.
I'm the one who picks this.
That's true. We need to, Dakota, we're picking on you next. We're going to pick like some just absolute miscarriages of engineering.
Yeah. Oh, that means I'm after that.
Yeah, that's my...
Guys, you're going to pull up some horrible dinosaur stuff. Oh, sorry, I'm Dakota.
Yeah, I'm Dakota. I'm an engineer by trade, but I grew up in the Bible Belt, the Deep South. I was homeschooled, so my initial middle school books were by Weil, exploring Genesis. So I'm never really a part of the Young Earth creation, but I was surrounded by them a whole bunch, and just kept it as a hobby. My actual experience has nothing to do with anything in this. Just as I said, hobby level, and I enjoy talking about it sometimes.
We're all here because we mutually enjoy good science. And we're forming a sort of nerdy Avengers team to bust the bad science. I mean, if we're the good Avengers, they're like, what is it, the Suicide Squad, right? That movie sucked, didn't it?
Yeah, it did.
I paid to watch it in theaters.
Oh.
Ouch, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that is a bummer. Yeah.
Although also, we can't compare them too directly because now we're mixing Marvel DC. So.
That's true. That is true.
Like we could be the Suicide Squad versus like we could be like the Suicide Squad versus like the Justice League. That would be still within the DC.
That's true.
Those were both bad movies.
Yeah, that is true too.
No, Justice Society was different. What's the evil Justice League? What was that one called?
Wait,
League?
Was Doom Patrol bad?
No, Doom Patrol was pretty good.
I feel like we're just the superheroes from that one SpongeBob episode. I want to be Krakatawa.
No, we're the Mystery Men from that movie, if anybody else remembers that one.
Want to see me running that rock and back? Want to see me
do it again?
Okay, speaking of, well, I was going to say speaking of bad media, but that's actually an excellent episode. So speaking of the opposite of bad media, let's go ahead and start this, shall we?
Yes.
Okay.
I have enough tequila, so...
Take a look at our North American continent. Do you see anything that might indicate a catastrophic past?
Nope.
You guys see anything that might indicate a catastrophic past?
Well, the thing is, yes, in some cases in localized areas, yeah. That's the thing. Were there catastrophes in North America? Well, yeah. I mean, obviously.
Actually, there was some evidence. I mean, not in the picture, but... There was some. I mean, if you go a little bit south of Texas, you find this really interesting meteor crater that somehow didn't kill Noah and everyone else.
I was going to mention the same thing. If you squint really, really hard, you might be able to make out the outlines of quite a large crater.
You might find the Tethys site up near Hell Creek to show where the giant tsunamis came and wiped everything out.
Yeah.
Right.
Kind of funny how those chaotic deposits stand out pretty well.
Hey, if you go more recent, I know of a fairly recent Cenozoic meteor crater that I've been to, Barringer Crater.
Okay.
I went and
cool.
visited that a few months ago because it's about 4.5-ish hours from me.
Okay, so he's not technically wrong yet.
Yet is the important part.
Yet is the important
recently,
part.
You can just point out any comedic recent event that's ever happened.
Yeah,
Right, yeah.
very true. Yeah,
Or any volcano.
maybe he's being allegorical. Come on, these guys love allegory. All right.
Proportions. A catastrophe so massive that it pushed up mountain ranges that cover many states today. One that was so intense that it resulted in 13 states being filled with billions of fossils, including hundreds of thousands of dinosaurs, mixed with marine creatures. The markers of a worldwide flood that covered North America are obvious and are clearly still seen today. Let's go back in time to see.
By all means.
Okay, did
Wow.
you see the things like Tippecanoe and other patterns he was showing?
Yeah, Zuni and...
That goes right back to Tim Clary's work, if you follow the ICR's stuff at all.
I try my very best not to.
And what Tim Clary does is Tim Clary takes mega sequences, which are the proper term for them is cratonic sequences. And they are records of sea transgressions on and off the continent.
Wait,
And
is that why they're all in the low-lying area in the middle?
Yes.
Oh, that makes sense.
Kind of funny. And if you look at them, this is something that most creationists don't really want to understand. They want to say, oh, well, how could you get such big geologic formations? We don't have such large depositional environments today. But you look at things like the Tippecanoe sequence, and you can see it's blatantly an ancient coastline. I mean, you look at any continental shelf, that's what those represent. They represent a shifting continental shelf over several million years. Really cool stuff. But what Clary likes to do is try to use these as like a model for how the flood worked and how the waters came in pulses. And it's really, really weird.
When I was reviewing this prior, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, okay, so they're essentially invoking these big pulses, right, to explain one, strata, and two, basically the sorting of the fossils, mimicking, the evolutionary progress or process almost precisely.
I will get you a link, however, to a very excellent International Conference of Creationism paper that Clary did, and it's about the only paper of his I've ever liked. And he used these flood interpretations of cratonic sequences to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the geologic column is a real thing and that creationists like Woodmurat need to shut their mouths because they're giving them a bad rap.
Yeah.
And, credit where credit is due, because Todd Wood is a very big proponent of trying to give creationists at least a little bit of kind of credibility. He was commenting. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, one of the what's the cross reference of the two honest creationists?
Yeah. Yeah.
Kurt Wise and Todd Wood.
Yeah,
basically. Yeah. We talked about this last time, I think, but Todd is basically at the point where he's relying entirely on, evolution's just wrong and the age of the earth is just wrong because it is. He's like, it all just looks that way. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
God
He admits it's got
you.
predictive power.
Do what?
He admits it has predictive power, you said, Colton?
Yeah.
He admits he has predictive power. He admits the evidence is there. He just relies on, look, the Bible does clearly say this is how God created. There has to be something wrong with the data, but we really need to focus on actually looking for what's wrong instead of giving people bad reasons why we think it's wrong.
Right. He's essentially taking the route where he's like, we don't know what it is yet, but you're making us look like idiots by suggesting bad reasons.
Isn't he also the one that's starting to suggest that maybe whales are evolved from something that came off the ark?
Yeah, that's what
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Pakicetus to modern whales is all post-arc, which is...
So
there's already a super fast hyper-evolution to explain the Barrowmans that they arbitrarily swap back and forth between, but all the way from Pakicetus to porpoises and killer whales and
that's a lot of evolution in a very short time.
And
Like,
it's not even like they have all 4,000 years to do it. They have about 300 to 400 years,
right,
depending on how long they want to say the post-flood ice age. Because past that, you start getting inscriptions and descriptions of like modern gray whales and modern orcas.
Right, and the thing that always puzzled me about that is like, well, why isn't that still going on? Because that would be observable within a human lifetime.
Yeah.
Didn't Jensen have something on that where he's trying to push that it was like a really big pulse after the arc and then it like petered off, coincidentally towards when we're no longer noticing it?
I think
that's convenient.
I really think it is a created heterozygosity thing. I think it's like there's only enough variability packed into the genome to get you so far, and that's coincidentally also the place where the entropy begins.
We can't mention Jensen or created heterozygosity too much because Standing for Truth might get in the call.
Oh my God, have we summoned him?
I've always wondered how they could squeeze that much genetics into just a couple of a pair of creatures or 7.
You can't.
You can't.
Yeah, absolutely, you can't. But I'm just like how many backflips they have to do to justify it.
I've never heard a professional creationist advocate this. I'll just say that now. But I have seen like Reddit creationists and YouTube comment creationists try to say that all the junk DNA we have now is the result of God putting like shut down, non-coded, non-transcribed alleles there for storage.
Yeah.
And so like the transcription proteins would just kind of like skip over these parts the creature doesn't need, so that way it doesn't die from protein overload.
So the thing that's weird about that is that usually those are the same people who are like, yeah, ERVs aren't really ERVs because they have a function sometimes, right? Like these are the same guys who are like, no, it's not junk. Actually, most of the human genome is functional. Oh, but also no, it's all junk DNA, and it's basically a relic from the created heterozygosity. You can't have both, boys. Pick one.
Their reason for saying that almost all of it is functional is that according to ENCODE, large amounts of it is transcribed.
Which
but the thing is,
went back on that. And it's
right.
Okay, it's like 30%.
And the other thing is, transcribed means it got turned into messenger RNA. It was read by something, basically. It doesn't mean it actually turned into a protein that's actually getting produced and used in the organism.
Aren't there experiments that show you could just make a gene completely dead and it doesn't give anything useful, and it will still just get transcribed because that's the chemistry of it?
Right, yeah, because...
knockout tests?
Yeah, something like that.
I think there was a mouse that they took out like 40% of the genome and still lived happily.
Yeah, in fact, they've even done things where they've taken what we know is functional DNA out of mice, and they've managed to remove a large portion of the mammalian blood clotting sequence, because you know how there's a protein cascade once your body sends a signal that you've been cut in order to trigger the whole blood clotting sequence. They've even managed to take out a huge portion of that, which creationists like to say is irreducibly complex and can't evolve. And yeah, you know what happens? You don't get hemophiliac mice. You just get perfectly fine mice with a shorter, slightly less efficient blood clotting mechanism.
No, exactly.
No!
It kind of goes against the intelligent design thesis, because, I mean, you look at my phone, sure, would it work if it had like 6 different motherboards in it? Yeah, probably. Is that necessary to have an efficiently designed product? Absolutely not.
I'm an engineer can answer this question. No, it's not efficient.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
yeah.
So regarding this whole thing, where like, oh, all these mega features or whatever creationists are calling. Oh man, you released a video. I have to look at that.
We're recording again. Okay, so
all right.
Make your point, Dapper D.
So my point was that near where I am, there are outcroppings a lot of like Cambrian strata, right? Including areas that are part of these like super groups that stretch across the continent. But one of the things about them is that, especially in my area, they're primarily formed of fine grain sediment in the form of things like shale or slate, which is the sort of thing that is extremely impossible to deposit during a violent, torrential, year-long global flood that covers the entire earth in water.
Hey, Dapper
D.
Hey, Colton. What's my favorite mineral? It is
Limestone.
also very difficult to deposit in tumultuous waters.
The thing
I'm
about
gonna say
shale.
limestone.
The thing about shale is
Limestone.
you have to be careful with it because and this isn't just creationist nonsense. There is some actual support for this. They found out that in at least turbidite currents, shale, because it's so cohesive, the shale particles can actually turn into little floccules and stick together, which makes them denser and they can settle out a lot quicker.
Was that
Right. The good thing is
turbidites
turbidites can be distinguished.
Right, that's what I was going to say. It's like if there were associated turbidites, then I would agree with that could be a problem. But
Yeah, but when you look at a
aren't.
lot of these black shale deposits, they don't look like turbidites. So what do? Well, they have to go to what Bertholdt says on his little flume experiments and say that it's just so big that you wouldn't be able to tell.
Well, the other thing that helps is that a lot of these shale deposits preserve things that are unlikely to be results of floods, especially in the fossils, like worm burrows. Like you talked about, Erica, in your video about the
Preapolids.
the preapolids, or the penis worms. When life was nearly ended by giant penises.
Yes,
with teeth.
They're constant burrowing.
Yes, giant penises with teeth. Everybody, look it up. It's a thing.
That's
look up
showbiz, baby.
Also, look up Priapus, who is the Greek god of gigantic penises, after whom they were named.
I believe too it's either the genus or the species name of that one. It's like a similarly related organism in South America that actually goes up the urethra of some people when they're swimming. And then
Please don't talk about that one. That's like a nightmare I've had since I was 6.
So
I saw it on the most extreme, and
I love the most extreme. I love the most extreme.
One fun thing about Priapus, the Greek god, is that he's usually depicted as having such a large phallus that he needs extra support from some kind of plank or something that he holds under it, because it's longer than his legs.
I have seen mini figurines where they have to kind of, carry the phallus on their shoulder.
Yeah.
That's a
Anyway.
problem that most primates don't actually have.
Yes, it is a problem it's particularly.
Speak for yourself.
Hardy har har.
I like when people, never mind. I'm not going to get into that. Okay, I'm pressing play.
Off topic.
I'm pressing play.
We can reconstruct just what happened during the biblical flood of Noah's time.
Not on the
Before
screen
the flood
capture.
began,
Yeah, it's not on the
America was
screen.
different, much different. You couldn't
I don't think you have the active
boundary markers around what we now call
We're
California
currently seeing
and
your
much of the West
YouTube
Coast.
page instead
South.
of the.
I like how they're basically just doing
Erica,
what?
we need the video. It's not on the
can't see it.
screen.
We're showing your page instead of.
Yeah.
Page.
Do you have 2 monitors?
No, I don't have to. Wait. No, I
Two
don't
windows.
You might be sharing
you
the
have to
wrong
open
window.
up incognito or
Hold
something.
on. New share. Boom. Oh, wait, I know what I'm doing. Wait, okay. Is it better now?
There we go.
Yes.
Okay,
There
okay.
we go. Look at that.
Okay, hold on. Okay. I'm just going to rewind it. You really didn't miss very much. It's basically just conventional geology stuff.
Oh, let's
But
get into the
fast.
plate tectonics. Let's get into the plate tectonics.
Boundary
Oh,
markers
please.
around what we now call California and much of the West Coast. South America was pressed up against North America. Most of the high hills did not even exist, at least not yet. The environment was much different, and large creatures roamed the lush green landscape, thriving in what was intended to be paradise.
That's small creature erasure, and I won't stand for it.
Yeah, let's I mean, come on. There were lice at the time. Let's remember the poor lice that died.
Talk about the small guys. I demand it.
Can I
Where?
also point out that Pangaea did have a lot of large mountain ranges?
Yeah,
and
it
that
did.
these formed most of the sediments that we see on modern depositional basins.
Right, because they had to come from somewhere.
Yeah. Now wait a second. Pangaea can't have mountain ranges. How else? That ruins Kent's.
That's literally wrong. You don't. How are you saying that there's no mountain ranges on Pangaea? Like the Appalachians were around.
Yep, that's
Not
when
just-
they were like taller than the Himalayas are now.
Yeah.
The Appalachians were uplifted during the Ordovician 445 million years ago.
No, Erica, I think what you mean is they were uplifted at the very beginning of the flood, and then they wore down a whole lot during the rest of the flood.
Well, clearly
Obviously.
because they weren't lithified sediment or something. Unless you're talking to Michael Lord, who's
Right, they were
gonna
soft
disagree.
mud. Oh,
Yeah.
that reminds me. Have you guys seen John Morris Pendleton stuff?
No.
So he's like a discount Hovind light. It's like the worst thing ever.
Oh
God,
so
he's the natty light.
Right, of Hovinds, which is already like, oh my god.
Bottom tier creationist.
His thing is like, he's explaining like fossil trackways. And his explanation is, dinosaurs or humans or whatever stepped in the soft mud while they were running from the flood, and then more soft mud washed over it, preserving the footprints. I'm like, no, if you cover muddy footprints with more mud, you just get mud. You don't get recoverable footprints.
You need a change of sediment type. And 2, it needs to be desiccated to some degree so it stays cohesive and doesn't erode.
Exactly.
If you want to say that it's completely unlithified, no cohesion at all, then what's going to happen is as soon as any current touches it, that footprint is going bye-bye. Go to a beach during high tide, stick your foot in the sand, and see what happens to the footprint. It's going to go away.
Better suggestion. Go to the beach, step into the water, and just keep walking. Don't stop.
Right.
Keep going.
One thing you could do is like, okay, it's low tide. Go to 2 or 3 feet away from the water line. Make a nice trackway. Come back 12 hours later. Look for your footprints. You know what you're not going to find? Your footprints. Even though the place you walked in will be above water again.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, too, you guys. With trackways, you typically get a lot of, the mud cracks being preserved, right? Because
there's mud cracks, there's raindrop imprints, there's all sorts of stuff. Look at the
ripple marks. You can even see areas where, depending on how firm the underlying mud was, you can see areas where, a deep footprint has had the sides that were pushed up around the footprint cave in. In fact, that's one of the reasons that a lot of the theropod footprints in the Paluxy River look superficially vaguely human-shaped things, is because the relatively thin part of the theropod toes that were lift up would then have sediment cave in before the footprints were actually preserved, which meant that only the parts where the toe pads,
right?
So basically the parts under I like to say the heel.
Yeah,
it's not really the heel, but the areas under the metatarsal bones, right, which had big heavy pads that were the primary weight bearing areas for the step. Those were preserved, and they were sort of vaguely human-like in that they were longer than they were thick and didn't have 3 toe marks. That's one of the reasons that they look.
It's wild too, because you can tell how fast something was going by its gait and how far apart essentially the footprints are spread. And you can even do this with things like trilobites, of course. And in the Grand Canyon, which Grand Canyon Monument to an Ancient Earth is a book that Colton and I both have and love.
Beautiful.
And it documents this slow ambulating rather, feeding patrol of a trilobite, right? That is clearly not running for its life in any sense of the word. Right. And the creationists like to paint, trilobites and more basal life forms as these complete morons that have no ability to react to stimulus in their environment. They'd be fleeing things just like anything else, but we've got loads upon loads of organisms preserved doing normal organism shit because they weren't afraid of anything, right?
Well, were you there?
One of my favorite things with the trilobites, though, is we have preserved in very fine-grained sediments trilobite tracks that end in a trilobite corpse that apparently was deposited during some violent, turbulent flood. How in the world?
Colton has this one that he loves of a nautiloid that you can see the drag mark.
So there was
20 meters of drag mark.
There was this ammonite shell that was found that clearly had been, I think it was killed by a mosasaur, it had the puncture marks. So it wasn't completely buoyant, it sunk down, but some of its chambers still had gas in it. And so it was slowly dragged along for a very long distance, it would leave a trail and then it would pick up a little bit, and then when the current calmed down, it would leave another trail from this really long drag mark. And then at the end, it just ran out of gas, fell over, and the whole thing got preserved.
Nice. That actually reminds me, one of my favorite Kent Hovind goofs, if I'm being nice, is he once showed a picture of a mosasaur, called it a zeuglodon, and identified it as a dinosaur.
Oh yeah,
What's
I
a
do remember that.
zeuglodon?
Zeuglodon is a kind of fossil whale.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're cetaceans.
Right, right. So he thought that this name was the name of a dinosaur when in fact it was the name of a whale, and he doesn't even know that mosasaurs aren't dinosaurs. In fact, mosasaurs are lizards. There's actually some good reason to think that they're just actually monitor lizards, as in like the family that we have around today, Varanidae. If you look at their skulls, they're almost indistinguishable from modern Varanid skulls.
Do we know that it could have been, or could not have been, rather, convergent evolution, though?
So we know that they were...
I thought as far as phylogenetic bracketing, they are within the monitor.
So
clade.
it's a little bit complicated because they're within a fairly well-supported clade called Toxicophora, which includes iguanas, it includes varanids, and modern snakes. Modern snakes and varanids are sister groups. That's one of the reasons why you see varanids, the monitor lizards, they have the forked tongue and the Jacob's organ just like a snake. And they even basically had some venom glands. And in fact, we found modern varanids often retain venom glands, but they're usually not very large. And so they form a fairly minor part of the whole prey capture system of modern varanids.
So it's like reduced, essentially.
But they're there. And we know that mosasaurs fit with somewhere around the snake-varanid split. And we don't know if they're basal to that split, if they're within that split, and if they're within that split, which side they fall on.
Right.
So varanids might be closer to mosasaurs might be closer to snakes, or they might be closer to varanids, or they might be just before that split. We're not really sure.
But they're somewhere close.
Right.
They're extremely close. And we know that for a number of reasons. It's not just the skull.
That's awesome.
But if you look at the skull of like a Tylosaurus and you scale it to be the size of, say, like a Komodo dragon skull, you would have to be pretty well versed in vertebrate anatomy to notice that there's a difference at all.
Right.
And I think somewhere in this video they're going to get to a sort of a loosely related point about like the fossil record and how they think it's catastrophic in ecologic zones. I may be mixing it up with another video.
Nope.
But I'd like to bring that up if we get to that.
Let's go.
With why mosasaurs need to be found with whales if the creationism hypothesis is true.
Oh yeah,
and they're not.
But let's see how.
And large ichthyosaurs.
And large ichthyosaurs and other marine reptiles. But
yeah, they're all found in the same deposits. Yeah, obviously.
Same ecological zone. If it was varied by ecological zones, they'd be together.
Don't forget large chondrichthyans, right? Like all your big sharks. Can't forget about.
Oh yeah.
But I guess Dorodon just. I don't know, climbed up or something. I don't know.
Basilosaurus likes to hang out near the top.
I will say the CGI is actually pretty good in this video.
I feel like it was just stolen.
I've been saying that.
It might be stolen, but I don't want to accuse them of that. Yeah, it's good. They have money. I don't know where it comes from.
No, I think we know where it comes from.
Might just be borrowing it from AIG.
Okay, well, yeah, possibly. Okay, let's go.
But when human wickedness became unrestrained and every thought of the human heart was only evil continually, God decided to wipe this rampant wickedness from the face of the earth.
Are those bats?
Records that God said to Noah,
"Bats ain't evil, man.
It's come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth." The process you're about to see unfold.
So hold on a second.
Just how life on earth was extinguished.
Oh, 1 second. So
that poor little shark.
I know. This isn't exactly scientific, but I just want to say that, like, I don't know if you want to interpret this super literally, because apparently God's solution to there being too much violence was to kill everyone in a horrible flood. Now, if I had done that, like if I had just taken everyone in the world together and drowned them all in my bathtub, you'd probably call me extremely violent.
I think the logic behind it, as a Christian, just not a literalist Christian,
fair.
Even though I think that it's an adapted story that God was using to convey a message of salvation and redemption, I don't think it was a literal thing. But I think the logic behind it, as young earthers see it, is that God cursed creation as a result of man's sin, because it's sort of like you reap what you sow. You know, you want to be shitty, well, I'm going to make the world shitty for you to live in, which, I don't know.
Yeah,
Hold on.
Oh, go.
Oh, sorry. Colton, you were the one who last time said that he was considering becoming an Eastern Orthodox Christian, weren't you?
Yes.
I think I see why now. I'm just going to leave it there because I think that you'll find the various interpretations of the Old Testament that you can find prevalently in Eastern Orthodox Christianity as very compatible with the kinds of arguments you're making now.
Okay, cool. My family's Polish, so I was just going back to my roots on that, but...
Oh, but they're Catholic, though.
Are they?
Primarily, yeah. So there's a
my
weird
family's
thing.
not Catholic.
So there's a weird thing. So Poland primarily became Catholic, and it's the only majority Slavic language country that's Catholic. And Romania became predominantly Orthodox, which is the only Romance language predominantly speaking country that's mostly Orthodox. So
I know that, at least when it comes to Genesis, I don't think that Catholicism and Orthodox are that distinct.
No, in that point, at least as far as evolution goes, they're not super distinct. Orthodox Christianity has a much higher emphasis on things like typological interpretations and the importance of the moral lessons and the metaphors for salvation in the Old Testament than I think even Catholicism does, but that's still a big part of Catholicism too.
Yeah, that's probably part of why I'm attracted
As
to
long
it.
as you're not a fundamentalist Southern Baptist, I'm fine with you.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I know that Christians are probably going to shit on me for not wanting to like vehemently go out of my way to defend against things like claims of the Exodus not being historically supported and stuff like that. And I mean, even Christians that I know in real life have gotten pissy with me because I'm like, I'm just not interested. If I read about it for more than 15 minutes, I get bored. It's only the young earther arguments and maybe some things about Genesis that I can stay interested in for any period of time. And two, I just don't have the background to defend against it.
Yeah.
So if it's valid, then cool. I don't know what to make of that, and I'm not going to spend my whole life trying to figure that out. Because I don't know, I just don't have a calling for it.
People have done that in the past, and they didn't figure anything else out, really. I mean, they're pretty much in the same place as they started. But I tend to take the opinion on whatever, like Noah's Ark, right? It was essentially written down right after the Babylonian captivity, and the Babylonians, of course, had Enuma Elish, right? Their own Epic of Gilgamesh too, big flood stories and things like that
which has been translated into Klingon.
Ah, I didn't know that.
You know, I don't understand how creationists and other fundamentalists find like this biblical history to be like intimidating and is a secular contamination or secular distortion of the history. And I'm just over here like, dude, this makes the whole thing seem so much deeper than your childish view of it just being, oh, Moses absolutely wrote the first 5 books of the Bible and I will hear nothing otherwise.
Even though he died within the first 5 books.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that too.
Well, and it's, you know, I think it's really just, it was a big statement on like, we are reclaiming not just our heritage, but we're going to take some of your myths while we leave when they left.
That's how I view it. It's like, hey, you needed like a bunch of puny gods and each could only create one thing. Ours created all of it, bitch.
Yeah.
I'm going to reveal a little secret. And so only viewers who get this far in the video on the Gutsick Gibbon channel are going to know this.
That's exclusive content.
Right, this is exclusive. This is an exclusive for Erica. For years, I sang in an Eastern Orthodox church choir.
That is a big secret. Do you have a good voice?
Well, he's talking to us.
Well, that's true. I do
soothing.
talk. It's a soothing voice.
True.
And so here's the thing. I was a tenor, which meant that most of the time I had to hold a single note. And every few bars or so, it would go up by like an octave or two, and then it would just come right back down. But I did sing in that choir, and it was an Antiochian Orthodox church, and I was one of the only choir members who ever bothered to pronounce the unpronounceable Arabic syllables.
And that's when you knew you were going to be a language guy.
Well, no, I'd been a language guy since long before that. That's why I could pronounce all the unpronounceable Arabic syllables. So
that's cool. And we should keep the video going.
We're going.
Agreed.
Enough of a tangent.
With the earth, save those on the ark. The Bible records that this fearsome display of God's wrath began when all the fountains of the great deep were broken up and the windows of heaven were open.
Why is
That was a Chinese sail ship.
I just saw that.
began a major transformation.
And the
This is
CGI
from
went
Answers
down
in
a
Genesis. The
little bit.
CGI is from AIG.
About to be rapidly
Oh, is it? Is that
replaced
how it's so good?
by
Yep.
tsunamis,
Okay.
flood flows, and volcanic ash. As the fountains of the Great Deep split apart, catastrophic oceanic rifting quickly spread around the globe. The scars of this rifting remain today, with some 40,000 miles of mid-ocean ridges visible on the ocean bottom.
Okay, hold on a second. So in a recent video on my channel, I talked a bit about this in the context of an actual Genesis Apologetics video. It was one of their John and Jane skits, if you're familiar.
Never seen them.
Well, basically, they have these two actors come on, and they pretend to be high schoolers.
Oh,
They talk
God.
about, yeah, it's extremely cringy, but they talked about
Totally
this.
radical.
And so I looked into things. So, you know, the thing about plate tectonics is that the plates rest on top of the upper mantle.
Right.
Right.
And they move because of convection currents in the mantle.
Yes.
So I looked into the viscosity of the mantle. And I don't remember the exact value that I found, but I did find some values that I condensed into like an average value. I think I just took the mean of them or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
But so, you know, the pitch that goes into the blacktop on roads,
Yeah.
that is actually a high viscosity liquid.
Yeah.
You're
Okay.
driving on a liquid every time you drive your car. The viscosity of that liquid is 1 quintillionth or so of the viscosity of the upper mantle of the Earth.
Oh.
So basically, the upper mantle of the Earth is
Do you mean
a solid.
a quintillion times?
No, it's 1 quintillion. So the mantle flows a quintillion times more slowly per unit energy that you input to it than the blacktop on your road.
So it's
So that's
essentially a solid rock, unless you're looking on a sufficiently long enough time scale.
Exactly. On any
Yeah.
human
Then
time
I'm heated
scale,
pressure.
right? On any human time scale, a liquid with that kind of viscosity would just be a solid. In fact, it would take multiple human lifetimes for you to take a solid of that kind of viscosity and notice that it wasn't just a solid.
There's the longest single going experiment in science is a jar of pitch,
Right.
which well more flexible fluid than the asphalt, but it's
Right.
a jar in Australia that's this funnel of pitch that drips, and they've gotten like 8 drops out of it in a century and a half.
Right. Now, multiply that amount, because that's the kind of pitch I'm talking about. Multiply that amount of drops, so 8 in a century. Now, multiply that timeline by a quintillion. So if 100 quintillion years had passed and you had managed 8 drops out of this experiment, that's the kind of fluidity we're talking about for the upper mantle.
And that's why I have to go with runaway subduction, which is its whole other bucket of chuckles.
Right. But that's the kind of flow from the mantle that the creationists want to introduce. And when you think about what kind of energy would it take for that kind of a liquid to flow that fast,
We got 10 minutes.
you don't have an Earth anymore.
The energy that it would take to essentially force that to move at the speeds that you need it to move, it's not going to work out well.
Well,
No.
I did the
I would have
numbers
to-
for the friction on just the U.S. continental plate moving the 2,000 miles,
Yeah.
and that heat alone is enough to bring the entire water of the Earth from freezing to boiling 5 times over.
Right. And that's
Boy,
and I'm
just
not
the
even
North American
counting
plate.
I'm not even counting the
Just
friction. And even without the friction, if you just want to move a fluid that fast with that kind of viscosity, you still need many orders of magnitude more than you're going to get from just that friction.
Turbulence is a bitch.
Dakota, did you, in that equation, I can't remember ever seeing it, did you take into account the fact that they have now officially abandoned Pangea as the starting configuration of the continents?
Oh,
And it gets worse. When I went to the Ark Park, they have a display of like Noah in his cabin or whatever, and he's got a model globe. And this isn't just like one observation, because Snelling endorses this outright on their website. His model globe shows Rodinia.
Really?
That is their starting continent, because every evidence for every supercontinent from Rodinia onward, they accept. It's just too undeniable for them to accept.
It's
So,
been a while
the
since I
continents-
covered that. How many supercontinents past that? Or like how far
I did a
back is
paper
that?
for this in my oceanography class. I believe there was at least 8, depending on
Like,
how you're
how far
defining
back
it.
is Rodinia in billions of years?
Rodinia was like pre-Cambrian.
Yeah.
Okay, I remember.
It's,
So you don't just have Pangea and then in a flood year them moving 2,000 miles apart to their current destination. They started out as Rodinia and had to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth.
Oh,
Can you even imagine the physics of having a boat in the ocean too while all this is going on? A big wooden.
And then Michael Ord wants to sit here and say that there clearly had to be calm areas. So things like the Castile Formation, which is, I believe, over 175,000 years of salt bars recorded on something that used to be on the American continent that was much like the Dead Sea. That had to be calm and quiet for salt barbs to form, especially with that many, like 175,000 pairs.
Man.
And he wants to say, oh, you're strawmanning the flood. It clearly could have been calm. Not when you've got 8 supercontinents forming and
we're recording, I think. Are we recording? Hold on, let's make sure.
I'm recording, so at least you'll get a mirror.
Excellent. Okay. And
Ravi Zacharias.
Oceanic plate to plunge or subduct beneath the North American continent. Just as today, ocean plates plunging into the earth generated earthquakes and tsunamis. However, because of the speed of this process, the tsunamis were hundreds of feet high. Nothing on the continent could withstand these massive surges. Early in this unfolding cataclysm, the Sauk, Tippecanoe, and Kaskaskia megasequences of fossil-bearing sediments were deposited over North America. Seawater rose globally as a result of new seafloor formation and increased thermal expansion. However, because only a small portion of the globe
hold on a second.
has been replaced by new, warmer.
So is he saying that all of the Earth's geomagnetic reversals that we can see recorded on either side of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge formed during the flood year?
Correct.
Yeah.
And that actually comes from Russell Humphreys. He actually made a testable prediction, a testable model of rapid geomagnetic reversals. And it was that with something like this, if you're having the reversals occur every week, I think is what he proposed, then in rapidly cooling rocks that do cool in under a week, you should see that partially recorded. He claimed it was successful, and I'll post a link for Erica to put in the bottom where it actually wasn't. He actually, to claim a successful prediction, he had to lie about what the scientists actually found. And his prediction in reality absolutely failed.
Are you saying creationists are dishonest?
Shit, perish the thought, man.
That's every one of Humphrey's predictions.
Same with the magnetic fields in Neptune, but that's a different discussion.
Yeah, it's gonna be less than Saturn. Well,
it's gotta be between Saturn and Earth. Oh wow.
Somewhere between there. Hey,
wow, you predicted that ice giants between our 2 planets would have magnetic fields within an order of magnitude between these 2 planets.
But remember that time that creationists helped invent the MRI? That counts, right? That's science.
Yeah, that's a testable model, isn't it? Well, then again, you can't test historical science, not a fact.
Well, plus the degree to which Dr. Damadian, the science...
Yeah, wasn't he not even that involved?
He really wasn't. He was tangentially related to the people who actually invented the MRI.
Oh, so Al Gore and the internet.
Well, no, Al Gore invented the internet. He took special action to go ahead and create the internet.
I like that we all know the MRI meme, because every time someone's creationists don't do good science, someone's oh, MRI. That's why we all know. Okay, ready?
Yeah.
More buoyant seafloor. These first 3 megasequences were mostly affecting the shallow marine realm, as the sea level was not high enough to inundate the North American interior.
Please pause.
It was not until the later...
So they are clearly endorsing ecological zonation as for why these rocks have fossil content. Or the fossil content of these rocks. I'm sorry, shallow seas of the type they're advocating, if they're not going to be found in the middle of the continent, not during ecological zonation. They're missing the point that these these sequences are stacked on top of each other in the same parts of the continent. They're not ecological zones.
It's not just that, but if we look to the fauna, like the trilobites are a great example. You know, they lasted from whatever, the Cambrian all the way to the Permian, you know, and we have
ordered.
Do what?
They're ordered.
Yeah.
You can use, they are very good index fossils for stratigraphy. There are noticeable differences between them. We know they all moved about, so it's not like they were somehow restricted to tiny sections of the seafloor.
Here's the thing. They all occupied, or not all of them, the vast majority of them occupied similar niches, and those were shallow seas a lot of the time.
They should be jumbled up. The same thing happens with ammonites.
Yeah, or any kind of organism that moves up and down through the water column, like Chimeroceras, the big ass the big ass mollusk from the Ordovician, right? It's a 20-foot long cephalopod.
Yeah,
moving up and down through the strata.
And they're also missing the point. If these are ecological zones, then why do we have shallow marine ecological zones throughout the entire column?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
I think what you're all forgetting, though, is that these are all just invertebrate type, so it doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah.
But they're not. But they're not. You go to the Devonian and it's just...
Yeah, they're all just invertebrate kind, so it just can all be explained by microevolution.
Yeah, true.
Oh, dude, no.
That's exactly the reaction I was expecting.
We're just gonna break Colton, and that's gonna be the end of it.
Okay, tell us more.
Absaurica sequence, when sea level was higher, that we see the first coal seams and land animals mixed in with marine animals in the fossil record. Once the Pacific and Farallon plates began forming in earnest during the Absaurica phase, subduction began along the west coast on a massive scale. The weight of the subducting slab along the western edge of North America caused that region to...
They're not mixed together. They're found at the same stratigraphic horizon. There's a difference. We're not, you can find occasional, jumbled deposits where they are mixed from things like actual tsunamis, but they're rare. And for the most part, even in these ecological zones, they're still stacked on top of each other. You can see where the sea level was coming and going.
Also, so here's something strange is that, the Carboniferous, right? That's where we get most of our oil, right?
And your polystrat fossils, they'll bring that up later.
Apparently, yeah. Everything is squished down because you've got all of this plant matter, and then suddenly you have the ability for plant matter to decay, and then it does so. And
wasn't part of it that in the Carboniferous, like why we have so much coal is because there weren't bacteria and fungi that could digest the lignin?
Yeah, that's precisely.
So it just kind of gathered up?
Yeah, that's precisely what I'm saying. It all built up and then compressed, and then eventually you get, this novel innovation in an organism that's like, wait, we can eat this shit. So then they do. But under this lens, if they're doing this whole pulse thing, then what are the organisms in the later pulses living in and feeding on if they're under the impression that all of the forests that make up the Carboniferous, which is an inordinate amount of wood, was compressed at the same time? Or rather, not compressed, engulfed by water at the same time.
Also, to get those coal seams, the most common creationist explanation is the floating forest hypothesis.
Yeah.
Again, referencing Clary, back in 2015, Clary had a very good paper that completely refuted the floating forest hypothesis. He showed beyond a shadow of a doubt that in a ideal divine created world, they would not be able to have a sustainable freshwater lens. So they could not support the plant or the fauna life that was needed. And two, that their distribution especially along the Atlantic coast of these coal seams was completely inconsistent with a single stratigraphic horizon of coal, as creationist theories would have predicted.
Well, and they would have to be hyper-evolving or hyper-adapting rather at the same time to constant changes in salinity.
Yeah.
Right.
As they floated about.
Yeah.
One of my favorite places as far as geology goes for defeating this idea is just Colorado. Because in Colorado, you can see repeated inundations of oceans followed by land ecosystems, followed by sea ecosystems.
And again, if you're dealing with ecological zonation, you'd expect shallow sea creatures deep sea creatures, shallow sea creatures, shoreline, and it would be a stepwise pattern.
Right.
Ecological zones cannot be torn up and transplanted one on top of another and maintain being one cohesive unit. If you're going to say they're getting transplanted, then they're going to get mixed up.
Exactly. And that's the thing. In Colorado, it's one of these places where you can see as you go up the geological layers, that's what would have to have happened. You would have to have like ocean, land. And I'm sorry, but none of these proposed creationist models allow for that.
And their only excuse that I ever hear is, well, you're debunking one at a time. What if they worked in some unspecified combination? And if a creationist wants to tell me that, look me in the eyes and tell me how. What specific way were these mechanisms all adjusted relative to one another to produce an exact pattern that makes it look like none were present at all?
Yeah, put up or shut up at that point.
Yes.
For real. And the thing is that you would expect too of that if it's in this ecological zonation stepwise pattern, that we would at least see at some point in some place improper mixing, one fossil out of place. That's all you'd need. And by place, I mean drastically out of place. But
and they wouldn't even have to be all that out of place, because the thing is, like, okay, so why shouldn't there be in the same layers as, say, Dimetrodon? Why shouldn't there be a fairly large varanid lizard? Because there isn't.
And they're in the same ecological niche.
Right. Why is it, or why isn't there just a sort of generalist marsupial, like, omnivore in those layers?
And on the
they're all succeeding one another's niches through time. That's why you don't find the same.
Why don't they come back?
Yeah.
If these zones are being picked up and transplanted around, like I've seen creationists, like in the Is Genesis History movie, they said that the zones were picked up and transplanted one on top of another. Why is it in an evolutionary progression? Why don't we see like a trilobite layer and then all of a sudden, for some reason, like a Silurian layer gets laid down, and then a Cretaceous, and then a Devonian? Well, I mean, why is it a consistent pattern across the world?
It's even worse. I mean, we get like shallow marine depositional environments in the Cambrian with animals like, Anomalocharus and trilobites and, early mollusks and whatnot. Okay, well then why is it that Cenozoic shallow marine environments don't have trilobites?
Yeah.
Please
they're the
this.
Same environment. Or again, where are the whales? And I'm not saying, if you want to say that modern whales are a post-flood creation, sure, I'll grant you that. Where's Durodon? Where's Basilosaurus? Where are all the other fossil species of whales? Why are they not in the same strata as mosasaurs and ichthyosaurs and other marine reptiles?
Pick any large air-breathing animal that moves up and down through the water strata, and why is it found precisely in the order?
Right. The excuse that I hear is that, well, God needed to create separate ecological communities, and that because then mosasaurs might eat the whales. Okay, you want to say that? I mean, sure, that it's not like they don't have a problem fending off sharks. If you've ever seen killer whales and dolphins fend off big shark attacks.
Well, why does God like the whales and not the ichthyosaurs? Why are the ichthyosaurs getting screwed?
Yeah, come on, God. Give the ichthyosaurs a break, man.
That too. But here's my bigger question with the whole, they were geographically isolated. Okay, why aren't they at the same stratigraphic horizon? Because when I bring that up, the response I always get is to start questioning the geologic column and that it's not accurate and that they really are. We've just misinterpreted it. To which I'll point you right back to Andrew Snelling and Tim Clary showing why that is nonsense and the geologic column is an accurate reconstruction.
Go ahead. Go.
Oh, you get another thing so during the Triassic, Sauropterygians were far more diverse than just the plesiosaurs that survived the end Triassic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So from the Triassic all the way until the end Cretaceous, you get plesiosaurs, whether they be pliosauromorphs or plesiosauromorphs. But during the Triassic, there's like 5 other branches of Sauropterygians. Why aren't they associated with other like Jurassic ichthyosaurs or mosasaurs or thalattosuchians?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Unanswered questions. Let's keep the video going.
To be depressed, and the Zuni megasequence began. This rapid plate tectonic process and subsequent sedimentation buried the pre-flood lowlands first in the southwest, what we call the Triassic today, New Mexico, and West Texas.
So just let it keep
This
going.
was soon followed by the Jurassic system rocks across Utah and Colorado, and then the Cretaceous system
Okay, hold on.
in
I
Montana.
thought they said Zuni, which covered. Okay, sorry.
As someone who was hatched during the Jurassic period, in the Morrison Formation, being Ceratosaurus, which is a well-known Morrison theropod.
We're with you, Dapper D. We're with you.
I know. It bugs me just a little bit to say that such an arid environment was laid down at the bottom of a worldwide flood.
Yeah.
And also, fun fact, kind of weird how there's all these big charcoal deposits in the Morrison Formation. So y'all had some wildfires in the middle of a global flood.
Oh, I remember.
Hey, but
I was there.
Those were caused by lightning striking floating forests. We forget all the time about the lightning in the floating forests.
Which then
It wasn't sniper lightning. It was basically artillery, even though we messed up the joke. So Dapper D, we had this creationist that I was talking with a few years ago, and I was bringing up the fossil charcoal deposits, the fusane deposits, and he was trying to tell me. He went through a bunch of excuses, and I told him how he didn't work, and he would just move on to another one. And he eventually proposed that big mats of vegetation ended up on Ord's beds sediment, and that lightning from the massive storms and hyper hurricanes would strike this.
Wait,
so
hyper hurricanes?
That's another thing. Hypercanes, yes.
Okay, hypercanes, sure.
Okay, so the massive lightning from these would somehow, even though the storm is moving, would target like these mats of vegetation, dry it out, and then spark it, so that way you could get wildfires in the middle of a global flood. I asked him, one, how do you expect that to happen when the storm is fucking moving? And two, I gave him an example of a I can't remember exactly where in the world it was found, but it was a charcoal deposit that to at a absolute minimum would have required a wildfire covering more than the surface area of Ireland at one time in order to get that amount of charcoal. I asked him, how can you get something that large dried out that quickly with, I guess, sniper lightning that fast? He stopped responding.
There's a surprise.
Ballistic artillery onto Ireland floating.
By the way, okay, I'm going to make a pitch to the Sci-Fi Channel right now. You guys need to do a Flood Hypercane Sharknado crossover movie. Because that would be awesome. Do Sniper Lightning, Sharknadoes, and Noah. Noah has to fend off Sharknadoes with Sniper Lightning.
Look, dude, I'm telling you, you want some laughs, look up the Hypercanes.
All Noah has in his arsenal is all of the metallurgy weapons that his sons created and loaded onto the ship, and then also that sweet Canaanite genetic work.
Oh yeah, that was another thing. Anyway, let's not get into a tangent.
Okay, we're starting.
Although the Farallon plate subducted initially at a steep angle beneath western North America, it appears to have been carrying along one or more large volcanic oceanic plateaus. When these plateaus reached the subduction zones at the edge of the North American continent, they acted to resist the subduction and caused the Farallon plate to begin moving horizontally beneath North America instead of at a steep angle. As the Farallon plate begins moving horizontally, it begins to interact.
Notice them just dismissing the fact that this is the exact same thing that tectonics describes. They're just saying it was
bottom
better.
part of the North American.
That's it.
They keep putting in parentheses secular timeline, just in case anybody gets confused.
Yeah, they're literally, all this video is doing right now, aside from trying to dismiss or trying to come up with ecological zonation, which we've already covered, is they're taking the exact plate tectonics time frame and just saying it was this but faster. That's all this is.
You guys know the Simpsons quote where Homer changes his name to Max Powers? He goes,
"Oh, I love that." He
goes, "There's the right way, there's the wrong way, and there's the Max Powers way." And they're like, "What's the Max Powers way?" He's like, "It's the wrong way, but faster."
I love that, because that was from the first 8 or so seasons of The Simpsons, when The Simpsons was good.
When it was very good. Okay, here we go. Okay.
American plate west of the current Rocky Mountains, shoving it off to the east. Simultaneously, the horizontally moving Farallon plate also drags warm, weak, and buoyant lower crustal rock of the North American plate along with it, doubling the crustal thickness beneath where the Rocky Mountains are today. Moreover, as the Farallon plate moves beneath western North America, its extra weight pulls down the land surface above temporarily to form the Western Interior Seaway, in which huge numbers of both sea and land animals can be found entombed today. A considerable area of North America was covered by the Western Interior Seaway.
Okay, hold on a second.
No, keep going.
Well, I just want to point out something about the biostratigraphy. Because the Western Interior Seaway is a thing that existed during the Cretaceous period, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it was entirely shallow water.
You could walk across most of it.
Basically, yeah, you could wade across a whole bunch of it. So why don't we see the Paleozoic organisms in it? Why do we only see marine organisms that are significantly more advanced? Why do we see mosasaurs and not trilobites is basically the question I'm asking.
Yeah, it's the same thing of these are supposed to be ecological zonation, but now they'd have to say that ecological zones somehow got transplanted because they were originally like geographically isolated pockets that only contained certain organisms, and then somehow globally got transplanted in cohesive units without mixing up in a consistent order.
Yeah,
it's a completely ridiculous hypothesis.
And the other thing is, we also don't even see some of the earlier Mesozoic marine reptiles. Like,
yeah, it's extremely specific.
I don't remember off the top of my head, but like, I don't even think we see ichthyosaurs in there.
I don't remember, but yeah.
I think we do see a few plesiosaurs, and like, no matter what we see, it's extremely specific, and it just does not add up with the whole ecological thing. If we assume, or if we go with the obvious option that like the ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs could have survived just fine in the Western Interior Seaway, as far as like depth of the water and abundance of food were concerned.
It's not going to go very well.
No, we don't even see Thalattosuchians, who were supremely adapted to shallow water predation.
Good.
Which ones are those? Thalattosuchians?
Thalattosuchians were early Jurassic to early Cretaceous pseudosuchians who were crocodilomorphs who were adapted to sort of shallow water pelagic.
Oh, okay. The crocodile whale.
Yeah, basically. They were like crocodile killer whales.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, I went into them in my most recent scripted video, things that aren't dinosaurs to crocodilians.
Yeah. To watch that.
Which also includes a clip from The Office. So
very nice.
Yeah. So there's a bit where Robert California is trying to convince Dwight not to take a manager position with Dunder Mifflin Saber, and he's talking about how terrible Florida is, and he says, "Alligators, Dwight. You know alligators are dinosaurs, right?" And Dwight's like, "It's complicated." And I'm like, "Yeah, it is actually a little bit complicated."
I love Dwight.
Yeah, Dwight's the best.
Oh,
so
God.
you know what? Bears beats Battlestar Galactica.
Identity theft is not a joke, Jen.
No, thousands of families suffer every year.
God damn it. Okay, here we go.
Let's do it.
The amount of North American Cretaceous sediment is greater than Jurassic or Triassic sediment. This partly explains the greater known diversity of Cretaceous dinosaurs. As the flood continues, the spreading ridge marking the western boundary of the Farallon Plate gets overridden by the North American Plate. This allows the Farallon Plate to detach and sink into the deeper mantle beneath, where remnants of it are even seen today. Widespread volcanism is also involved in this process, with massive volcanic activity escaping from tears within and along the edges of the subducting plate traveling from west to east. This explains massive dinosaur graveyards preserved in sediments mixed with volcanic ash. One section of the Morrison Formation, called the Brushy Basin Member, spreads across 5 states and includes over 4,000 cubic miles of volcanic materials.
Morrison was Jurassic, and they just showed T-Rexes, right?
What'd you say, WD?
Morris Formation is Jurassic, and they just showed Triceratops. No, T-Rexes, right?
Yeah.
Minor details. Sorry.
They were
I also want to
fast too.
I also want to ask how we're getting over 740 miles of soft, gently settling subaerial ash to form underwater, because it does not look like ash that was laid down in oceanic sediment. You can tell there's a difference in how it gets laid down. It was clearly subaerial.
The answer is magic.
The thing is, too, is that even if it was laid down in a terrestrial fashion, right, it's not going to condense fast enough in the course before the next pulse would essentially come and then wipe it clean off of the surface and intermix.
Yeah.
I do want to make one quick correction, though. There are no Triceratops or Tyrannosaurus in the Morrison Formation. Triceratops and Tyrannosaurus are late Cretaceous. The Morrison
That's
Formation.
what I was trying to point out. They showed a T-Rex in the video, and then immediately after said Morris Formation.
Right. Actually, interestingly enough, about like 50% of the preserved biomass for vertebrates in the Morrison Formation is Allosaurus.
Yeah.
Which
because
means
it was a
we
desert
have.
Area.
Well, it not only is that, but also it means we have a strong taphonomic bias for Allosaurus, because if you look at like just the trophic levels in the environment, if we were to assume that there's no taphonomic bias, then there's an extreme abundance of apex predators, an extreme paucity of prey, which isn't actually viable.
Right.
So the Morrison Formation.
No stable.
So are you saying that it was more likely that the bigger, more durable bones were the ones that would get preserved?
Not just that, but there's also a taphonomic bias towards predators and against prey. So it's more complicated than that.
Next, you're going to tell me there's a bias against soft-bodied organisms.
I know, right? So what actually seems to be a potential case is that there may be a sort of predator trap situation going on in the Morrison Formation, which heavily prefers predators over prey, because just overall, the trophic levels, if we assume the hypothesis that the preserved bones from the Morrison Formation represent the actual ratios of animals, it just doesn't make trophic sense. So there must be some kind of taphonomic craziness going on with the preservation bias, which also doesn't add up at all with any of this flood stuff, because they're obviously almost entirely air deposited sediments.
All this interesting geologic history that is just a threat to them and they don't want to listen to.
Well, and
it's so interesting.
And it also just kind of erases like biogeography, because in earlier periods, like during parts of the Paleozoic, these areas that are currently in the Morrison Formation as a desert were shallow marine environments. You can find trilobites in those areas and lower strata.
Yeah.
So it still doesn't add up.
Yeah. Again, the ecological zonation has to be one of the worst theories that creationists have.
Yeah,
and that's
Can you really say it's the worst?
In terms of how often it fails, I would have to say yes.
I mean, there's also the one-way speed of light argument.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, hey, I guess I'm...
That at least doesn't technically fail, because under that model, it always works. It's just really stupid to have assumed that.
You need to have a lot of assumptions.
Reliably always correct.
And it's like, I'm sorry, Lyle, my God did not lie to me by creating relativistic jets from quasars 10 billion light years away that would take about 100,000 years to spread out to their current distance. He did not create that just for some unknown functional mature purpose.
No, Colton, obviously, according to creationists who are obviously correct, God is a lying bitch and you just have to accept it.
So God lied to me about the history of his own creation, yet I can trust Christ to save my soul.
Absolutely.
Hey,
or maybe you can't, and you're just doomed to hell.
Okay, if any creationist wants to tell me that to my face, they can step outside, and we're gonna have a fucking problem.
To fail, you have to at least be in the race, you know. So I think
even Todd Wood had an article where he was talking about this like anisotropic synchronicity or whatever it's called, and he's like, "Is this interesting for creationists? Not really. It's completely untestable. Really, who gives a shit?"
God damn it. Okay, you guys, looks like we're almost about to run out of time. Would everyone be okay with maybe finishing up when I get back?
That'd be fine.
Yeah, hey, I'm down. I
Yeah,
always
well-
have fun with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it'll just be an excuse to meet again, but it's like 2 a.m. and I have to
Definitely.
get up.
2
Get some
a.m.
sleep before your
Alright,
flight.
so let's put a marker at the video is at 5:50.
Perfect.
Hell yeah.
We'll finish
Absolutely.
up. Okay.
All right.
Well,
All right,
thank you
guys.
very much.
I had a
everybody.
blast.
Yeah,
I
It's
did too.
Yeah,
always
it's fun.
a good time.
Nice
Yeah,
talking
Erica,
to you.
every time we've hung out together, I think we've had a fun time. We need to do more stuff together.
You want to just hop
Absolutely.
in Discord, Dakota? Because it's like 9 a.m. It's like 9 p.m. So.
Oh, I'm gonna be
Yeah.
on Discord.
Okay. Awesome.
Okay.
Plenty
See you
of
guys
time.
later.
Good night,
Bye.
Erica. Have a good
Goodbye.
Will do.
Enjoy. Get drunk.
Oh, I will.
Definitely.